And we're live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. We've got CT, my man EJ, New York Knicks
Yo.
Nation. We're here to talk about the mid-season report. How we doing, fam?
Hey, what's up, CT, my guy? It is a pleasure as always to be on. Um, we're at the halfway point. Believe it or not,
Mm.
it felt like just yesterday we were just talking about season previews, and now all of a sudden we're officially at the 41 game mark. So this is a really great pleasure. How are you, doing, my friend, man?
Doing well, fam. Doing well. Nice off day, and after a time to decompress a little after a tough loss.
Yeah,
Tough loss
yeah,
yesterday. Wasn't able to go on to a post game, but was always going to hit everyone up with you and I on this mid-season report. It's been a lot. We have to talk about it,
definitely. We got to
EJ.
shut it up. Yeah, we got to
Yeah,
chop up that game.
41 games, official halfway point of this crazy Knicks season and NBA season. Seventh seed right now. One game off Indiana, who we play tomorrow,
Hmm.
22-19. And we're going to be talking about our grades overall and our impressions from the season so far and some projections. Put you on the spot and put the chat on the spot as well. Salute to everyone out here in replay gang as
Love it.
Dirty Dancer comes through with his thoughts initially. We're all thinking the same thing.
Exact. That's why I smiled. I was thinking the same exact thing. This is like highs and lows. It's what our team does.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, we had our predictions, we had expectations, and let's get straight into it, EJ. In terms of our preseason preview with Mark Berman, who couldn't be with us today, but might be coming on at a later date soon. Um, but needless to say, we got everyone covered with our thoughts tonight. Yeah, preseason predictions, fam. I'm going to say we're right at where we're at, or
Yep.
slightly ahead of schedule. For me, what about you?
Yeah. I think my preseason prediction was 42 and 40. I
Yeah,
think yours was 44 and 38, something along the lines of that. I think Berman was 41 and 41, or maybe 40 and 42. So we're like right at that same point that we had predicted. Um, and I think Dirty Dancer, you hit the nail on the head. This is what I've said this like the last four podcasts, and I don't like repeating myself, but I'll repeat myself because it makes perfect sense to say this. This is what 500 teams do. Um, last night's game was frustrating because in just one game, you experienced as many different possible emotions you could experience during a game. You felt concerned with Julius at the start of the game. You're like, what's going on? But at the same time, it felt like every player, almost every player, with the exception of Brunson, was off. And then to have a 17-point lead, and then for the fourth quarter, for there to be an implosion the way that it was. And let's also, I don't like doing this, but there's a lot of credence to this, and you've been tweeting about this during the season, especially the last month or so. There have been some really bad calls during some of these Knicks games recently. I'd say for about the last 3 weeks, it raises the question like what is happening in terms of the officiating. I mean, so much so that uh, when Jalen Brunson got checked into the announcers table, even Clyde had to let you know what was up. Like, what is going on here? So I think last night really highlights some of the ups and the downs and the frustrations of this team, a 500 team at this point. What are your thoughts, CT?
yeah, you hit the nail with the officiating. That's a story in itself, but we'll talk about that throughout the show because it's definitely a key theme from the first part of this season. I would like to bring up. I don't think the Knicks are getting the same kind of whistle as some of these upper tier teams like
Yeah.
and just slightly recapping last night's loss. I think Drew Holiday, players like Fred Van Vliet, they're afforded a certain kind of ability to be physical with
Hmm.
guys But if a Brunson or Emmanuel quickly on the flip side are physical guarding their man, it's ticky-tack every
Yeah.
single time. And there's a lot of points, EJ, that yes, Drew Holiday picked up 3 quick fouls, but
Hmm.
then actually they swallowed the whistle after that.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't care if he was on 5 fouls, they never would have called the 6th foul. He could have slapped someone and still not got that 6th foul.
Yeah. 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 It definitely felt like an unevenly refereed game, which is
Mm.
concerning. Like you want for there to be, especially for this team, where there are moments where it feels like because they feel disadvantaged as a team, where they may not necessarily have all of the best players on the court all of the time, there are definitely times where you feel as if they're going to complain to the refs, and that's going to agitate or exacerbate the situation as well. So it's almost like it makes it doubly worse. Like you can see, for example, Hartenstein, he always has this look where he's like, what did I do? Kind of expression. You see it with Julius, where sometimes Julius is like, he gets frustrated because he doesn't feel like he gets the calls that he may merit. And that makes it's more frustrating for a 500 team, to not get those calls that they might deserve or they might need at a particular time.
Yeah, because in such a tight game, yes, it matters. Yeah, execution does matter, and
Hmm.
the Knicks failed to execute last night. We always give the other team props because the Milwaukee Bucks most likely, chat EJ, at late June this year will be competing for a championship in the NBA Finals. Let's keep it a
Definitely,
buck. You know what I
definitely.
mean? The fact that the Knicks go toe to toe with them is kind of reflective of my thoughts from this season. Where we're growing. We're growing, but yes, there's very much frustrations because there's clear areas where everyone sees where the Knicks can improve upon, and I hope that we do see more improvement in the second part of the season. But I guess it's also good that we are slightly frustrated because we've
Hmm.
seen excellent play. Like like Dirty Dancer says, most of the guys have had incredible stretches where they look like killers, and then they've looked subpar. You know.
Well, that's why I mean, I think one of the questions we're going to have to answer at some point during this podcast is, are the Knicks going to be buyers or are they going to be sellers? And that's really the question that a team like this you have to raise, because they're right in the thick of the play-in slash playoff chase, but it's because it's clear that they need a piece or two to be solidly in the playoffs. And that's what's always concerning, is that, is it smart to invest in a playoff chase if you know that you're not on the tiers of you're not on the same tiers of a Milwaukee or a Celtics or of a Brooklyn, but is it worthwhile to then get into the playoffs if you also know you're going to be at the bottom rung of the 6 through 10? Um, that's where it is kind of a complicated situation in terms of knowing that you need pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's dive in now, EJ, into the 41 games we've seen. And the
Yeah.
first question I would like to ask you and the chat and Knicks Nation is, what's been the biggest surprise for you so far?
Whew, the biggest surprise for me would definitely have to be, and this is not a surprise, um, Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson is the biggest non-surprise there could be, and I'm wording that intentionally. We knew what he was, but for it to translate as a Nick, for it to translate as consistently as it has for the most part throughout the course of the season, that has been the biggest surprise, non-surprise, that there's been this entire season. I mean, I don't think there's anyone who's a credible NBA analyst, a credible NBA fan. I notice I said credible. I don't think there's a credible NBA analyst, a credible NBA fan who can criticize this deal, this offseason. Like at this point, if you're going to complain about, Jalen Brunson, there's something really wrong. This was an incredibly solid move. I know that there were people who thought it was a ridiculous move. It was a CAA conspiracy, but at this point, like, are there still any detractors from the signing? I mean, I guess there are a few who probably wanted to tank, this season, but this is a guy who's in serious all-star consideration category. So that's my biggest surprise, non-surprise this season. How about you?
Yeah, great one, man. I agree. And also, yeah, like Dirty says, Randall. There's so many ways, directions I could go
Hmm.
with this thing. Um, I want to lean towards Evan Fournier situation because
Mm,
the fact that he was out of the rotation so early in, I think it was like 20 games in, 18 games in, he was completely out of the rotation. So
yeah,
that was the first major surprise of the halfway point. Cam getting in early wasn't that much of a surprise because we know Grimes wasn't ready to go. Um, but looking back at the latter end of the first part of this season, more recently, I've probably got to say the the immediate growth of Grimes and Quickly. Yep. Yes,
yeah,
I was hopeful and I thought we'd see improvement, but I think it's been obvious. It's been so clear how ready Quentin Grimes and Emmanuel Quickly are to
yeah,
be 36-minute players in the
yeah,
NBA now, each and every night.
yeah,
I don't think anyone can doubt that. We're seeing that now. And not only are we seeing it, but they're getting those kind of minutes, 36 minutes apiece.
yeah.
Um, yeah, like Dirty hits on as well. In terms of defensively, Quickly, but offensively, I've been in
Hmm.
just the last like 10 games. He's made clear developments in terms of decision making, dribbling, passing, and shot selection. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know what? It's one of those things when we talk about our takeaways from this first half of the year. That's one of the things we can take away and just say like it's an incredible takeaway. The fact that we have young players who are contributing and who are growing. And let's throw this onto it. IQ, not just this season, but the tail end of last season as well, has proven, at this point, we can't think this is an anomaly. This is who he is and growing to be. Um, and so this is where, I said this a couple of podcasts ago, a couple shows ago, he's becoming he's becoming a problem. Um, and that's a good problem. The fact that Grimes is playing significant minutes, the fact that quickly he's playing significant minutes. Uh, that's great. No matter what happens this season, it's been rare where we can look at and I said this last time and you asked me to preach. Um, it's been rare where we can look at a Knicks homegrown talent and look at it excitedly and say, "Oh my gosh, this is a Nick we drafted." And we're actually able to say that about a few Knicks at this point. That gets me excited. That's a really big surprise if you look at it like long term and what we've been as an organization for the past 15, 20 years. That's not something we could easily say, during the fill in, like, whatever, like the Phil Jackson era, like Clee Anthony early, anyone? That's my random Nick of the day.
Yeah, no, you hit. And in terms of a less pleasant surprise, I want to give you a few as well before we move to the next thing.
Yeah.
Um, Pleasant and unpleasant is the Jericho Sims development, and unpleasantly, I didn't expect Isaiah Hartenstein to not be great
Yeah.
for this team. Yep. I mean, there's obviously questions around his usage, but in terms of his fit, like he could very well be DNP, EJ, and I wouldn't lose a second of sleep.
Yeah.
You know. How
Yeah.
about you?
Uh, my unpleasant, I'll go with the hmm moment.
Yeah.
And that'll be, I agree with you with Hartenstein. It's been especially the last 15 to 20 games, it's
Yeah.
been a noticeable drop. For me, the other, I wonder what's going on here, has to be Derrick Rose. Um,
Oh,
the Derrick
that's a great
Rose
one.
situation is really fascinating. When we did our preseason, um, show, he was my X factor. He was my X factor, and he's become an X factor in terms of us trying to figure out what is X, what is he, what does he represent, what is happening in terms of him and his role. So that's the biggest surprise I have. Well, that's been the biggest surprise for me this season, especially because many of us, when we criticize Tom Thibodeau, one of our biggest complaints is that he's stubborn, he sticks to his players, and he's been kind of cutthroat when it comes to Derrick Rose, and so that has been really shocking. That's been really shocking to me.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's way up there as well.
Yeah,
Top 3 surprises
yeah,
for me, Derrick Rose. Now, I'm sure we're going to find out more eventually, whether it's in months to come, next year, when he's traded eventually, when he retires. At some point, we're going to find out more information. But he's clearly not. For me, it's got a lot to do with health.
hmm
I think it's got a lot to do with health. There's only so many surgeries and setbacks an
yeah,
NBA baller can have. EJ.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it's
Mm.
it's kind of surprising because it wasn't that long ago. We were astonished at how Derrick Rose had remade himself in that bubble season, and how well and how much of a role he had played for that fourth seed playoff run that we had. And we were all looking forward to the next few seasons, optimistically suggesting that if only Derrick Rose can remain healthy, what an important cog he's going to be. Um, but to see Miles McBride surpass him in the depth charts with significant minutes, that's been surprising. Um, and it looks
Yeah,
like that's almost a permanent thing unless there's an injury or catastrophic turn of events. It really is surprising, and so I wonder what's going to happen to Derrick Rose as we approach the trade deadline, and what happens to his career. I mean, this is really like one of those moments where you start to say, "Oh wow, this could be winding down really quickly."
yeah, which would be sad, definitely. Because I mean, to go from 2 years ago to be like legit 6-man candidate
hmm
to hardly being ready to go anymore. And it's kind of like I actually tweeted this today. Iman Shumpert,
Yeah,
the
that was a good
fellow,
tweet.
yeah, a Knicks beloved Knicks player that people forget about, and the way his career, the latter end of his career, just absolutely disappeared, dwindled. And Shump obviously won a chip, and it's great. He got paid. His last contract was a good one, but he's only 32 years old.
That's
I mean,
crazy.
it's like 4 years older than Julius.
That's
If
crazy.
Like he could legit still be in the NBA, and I know he's probably still tried to work out for a few teams. I think I remember a year or two ago. But with that said, yeah, that could be a situation where Derrick Rose just career becomes like to an abrupt end real
Mm,
fast. Um,
yeah, that's
but
that's really
great,
crazy.
yeah. So we wish Rose well. Everyone out here, we're huge Rose fans up in this piece.
Absolutely.
Um, for everything he did for his career in this franchise 2 years ago. But a positive spin is that, like the chat was saying, it's onto the future now, EJ, which is the theme of this mid-season report. Now it's all about the future for this club.
Absolutely.
Mm.
If you just heard
Yep.
New York City was just saying hello to somebody on their motorcycle, of course they know that
Salute.
that was the buzz. That was the buzz for Knicks Buzz
Yeah.
tonight. Um,
We're
so
real. We're live, ladies and
absolutely,
gents. You never know who might just spring up on me.
that's right.
You
You
know.
never know. Yeah. Here's a quick question for you, my friend. Uh, so we talked about some of the positives. We talked about some of the surprises. Let's uh, let's think about this. What was the low light for you this season so far? What was the moment where you're just like you threw your hat around, you were like, "Oh man, the buzz is it's buzzing too hard." Uh, what was your
Yeah.
low light?
Yeah, no, that's a great question too, and one that I've had a bit of time to think about it recently. Obviously, the Dallas loss. I'm not going to choose that one
hmm
because the club was actually doing well up until that. It was a loss we'll probably hopefully never see again. But to me, that's not really a low light, a low point. Um, a real low point would probably be the biggest one I would probably go with was earlier in the season, and before we went on that big streak.
Yeah, I know where you're going with
Before
this.
we went on that big streak, it was too many questions. It was too much of the same old that we've been seeing in the past,
Yeah.
and less optimism to see or to be hopeful for. And I'm talking across the board with Tibbs rotations. We had Dan Favali on, after he did that big Tibbs piece.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what's going to happen, man? Are we going to have to fire another coach like 20 games in?
Buzzer beater, watch it.
Yeah. So not that I would be against firing Tibbs at that point. What needed to be done would need to be done, but it was more like, okay, I was less optimistic about the future of where things are going. So yeah, before that 8-game win streak, the season was a different beast for me. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think it's right around the same point because I know that was right around that time where the drum beat for firing Tibbs was getting louder. So it's right before the West Coast trip, the Thunder game, that Thunder 145 game, where Shea Gilgeous-Alexander just went off and 145 points. I mean, that's NBA 2K levels right there at that point. And I think that anyone who was in the Knicks Twitterverse, anyone who was in the content space, you really, I love you too, Buzzer Beater. You really felt that level of concern that the season could go in all kinds of awful directions. To have that kind of loss and for it to be a home loss at that, that was really a major concern. That was really like oh my gosh, this season can become disastrous really quickly. So I think that was a really scary moment. I think that's really where a number of us started to think to ourselves, is the team going to implode? That was right around the time where there were conversations about players only meetings. When the team has a player only meeting, that that's when you're like, oof, has the coach lost the team? And so for the Knicks to, run into like a timely schedule and to really do well on that West Coast trip, because usually historically we haven't always done well on West Coast trips, that to me was low light and the beginning of a ray of sunshine.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, you hit it. And obviously, at the lowest point, there's only one way up, and
Yeah.
that brings us to a situation where the Knicks made changes that a lot of the fan base wanted to see. Evan Fournier out, some defenders come in, and this team gets closer back to an identity. And why don't you give me your thoughts on what was the catalyst to after that low point to get to where we're at right now, and what's got you most pleased about that?
I guess the big thing that we can always take away from this is that um, the Knicks have, for the most part, been in every game they've been in almost every game since that mid-November stretch. Um, and to me, that's encouraging because I try to be incredibly realistic, and the Knicks aren't as talented as the Bucks. They're not. I mean, let's just keep it a buck. See what I did there? Um, so one of the things that encourages me is that they've been competitive and not a team, and that means to me that this is a team that Coach Thibodeau, whether you like him or you don't like him, it's a team that's trying. And so, to Buzzer Beater's question, what's the vibe in NYC concerning the Knicks? So obviously there are two major sports radio stations here in New York City. There's ESPN Radio, which is 98.7 ESPN Radio, and there is WFAN. And usually they'll pay a lot more attention to the Knicks when the Knicks are on a massive winning streak, unless it's in the middle of baseball season, or football season. And so at the time when the Knicks were in that 8-game winning streak, the Jets and the Giants dominated the airwaves. Um, but one of the things that a lot of the sports commentators on New York radio have pointed out is that the Knicks are competitive. The only issue that they have is that there isn't that transcendent top 20, top 25 star that makes them box office all the time. Um, and really quickly, what's fascinating about it is that although the Nets have been hot, like, I mean, incredibly hot, no one talks about them. They're a non-factor in New York sports radio, New York City sports radio, New York sports media. No one talks about them. So this New York City will forever be a Knicks city, even though KD is KD and Kyrie has been really, we haven't really heard much about him recently. But I think, as CT put it, if the right moves are made within this offseason or a year, you know, the Knicks might be dominating New York sports media all over again as well too.
Yeah, I guess there's been a lot more of a positive vibe recently in terms of the coverage. Like
Yeah,
you said, competitive. Um, it's kind of like we're in a situation where it's very clear to everyone what this team needs to go to the next step,
yeah,
which can be a positive because we have foundational pieces, now in place that you can say, hey, like in terms of age, in terms of play, in terms of contract, these guys we can build with before. We haven't really had that a lot in the last 15, 20 years, So we know key areas where we need to improve and we know what we can expect from certain guys and we can be hopeful that other guys can become this, like Grimes and IQ Sims. Um, in terms of some question marks as well, obviously there's Obi, there's Cam,
yeah.
there's how are we going to get that number one piece. But there's less questions. Do you feel like going from the
Yeah,
start of the season to
yeah.
now, there's less question marks on how can this team be a winner in the league?
And the other piece too is that it's not a laughing stock. That's one of the biggest things that we can't forget. Like, you have to remember, before Phil Jackson was hired, the Knicks were constantly at the center of sports talk in New York City for all of the wrong reasons. Guys, let's go back 6, 7 years. Remember Charles Oakley. Let's remember there was going to be a protest outside of Madison Square Garden right before Phil Jackson was about to be hired. We can't forget that. Like, where ESPN would use any opportunity to make fun of the Knicks. Charles Barkley. I mean, Charles Barkley for seasons, like I'm talking about like 6, 7 seasons in a row, even if the Knicks weren't playing, they would use it as an opportunity to to make fun of the Knicks, to lampoon the Knicks. I mean, their television shows, guys, random television shows. If you're a fan of the show Power, Power has a low-key Knicks joke where they're making fun of the Knicks. Where, like, one of the characters is a basketball player, and they're like, "Why don't you come save the Knicks?" And he literally says, "There's no saving the Knicks." So for us to be at this point now where it's harder for those jokes to be relevant or to make sense, that to me is market improvement. Even if we're not in championship caliber, but we're not hearing that much about James Dolan as much, which is, to me, that's a win. That might be the win of the season. That,
Yeah,
there's been no Dolan talk. So again, these are things that we have to take into consideration, and this is
definitely.
progress.
Yeah, definitely. Progress. And in terms of what we keep saying, fam, we need this on some merch for sure.
Yeah,
Every season has a mind of its own, right? And
that
just
has to be merch. Yeah,
extending that um, in terms of the rest of the league, fam, nothing's promised, nothing's given. Going into the start of a season, team experts look at teams on paper and um, estimate how they're going to do. But this year has been insane. It's been a great example of nothing's promised, nothing's given.
yeah.
For everyone that thinks the Knicks aren't progressing or we're too far away, I urge you to look at the LA Clippers. I urge you to
Whew.
look at the Golden State Warriors,
Wow.
um, Atlanta, Chicago, Miami, Toronto,
Toronto.
Chicago, right? Everyone had these teams ahead of the Knicks right now, and how we can flip that narrative. Obviously, it's been off the back of some um, rejuvenated play from Randle, Brunson's play and all the young players, most of the young players taking, a step. And I do mention 41 games. That's not that big of a sample size. I really look forward to the rest of the season because I think we're in rhythm. The young players that are playing well, EJ, are getting 30 plus minutes.
Absolutely.
And that's the best way to improve in the league is reps.
Absolutely. And I'll even say this too. Like one of the things that I had talked about like during the preseason was that um,
Mm.
we can't evaluate the Knicks in the preseason because they need like a quarter of the season to kind of gel and to coalesce around one another. Um, it's to me, um, yeah, Soul did clown us. Yeah, but Buzzerbeat, I do remember that line as well too. But the other part of it as well too is like you said, those other teams that we took for granted. I made the prediction that Golden State was going to win the championship again this year, and who would have imagined that they would be playing the way that they are right now? The Clippers. A lot of pundits thought that the Clippers were going to really take the West. Um, ESPN, I think, predicted that the Knicks were going to be 37-45. That looks like a really horrible bet at this point for them. Like it looks like we're easily going to surpass that. And the other key piece, and this is what I was trying to remember to say, the Knicks easily could have had an additional 3 or 4 games. So the record that we have right now easily
Yep.
could be +3, +4.
Facts.
So that's an
Yep.
important consideration. When you have younger players, when you have players really trying to establish and understand their roles, you kind of take that with it. But it's really
Yep.
important for us to remember that we're in a really good place. I mean, we're not in a perfect place, but just as Jerry just said, Jerry, you got it. We're competent. That's market improvement. Competent.
Mm. Yep. And we'll talk about where to from this organization and the flexibility we have moving forward. But EJ, chat, in these 41 games, what have we done well and what have we not done well?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I think one of the things that we talked about with Coach Nick last podcast, that that perimeter defense at times still is a bit
Mm.
dodgy.
Yeah.
So that to me is part of the concern. Um, I think fluidity at the end of the game is still something that we want to ensure to limit ISO. There's a beauty in team basketball. There's a beauty when you can, as Clyde says, as Walt Clyde Frazier says, every game the ball moves faster than the man. So, to have that maturity at the end of the game. And the other thing I would say too is free throws, free throws, free throws, free throws. We can't leave free points when you're not always going to be better than your opponent. You can't give up or you can't miss out on free, easy points. Those would be the concerns that I've had so far for the season. What about you?
Yep. Can't disagree with the free throws. You hit with the late game execution. Um, I'll start with, in terms of what we've done well. I think the integration of Brunson, you've got to start there. Probably the biggest success story of this season, or equal success with Randle,
Hmm.
is the integration of a new player. And 40 games in, I said this on one show, I can't remember. It looks like Brunson and Randle have played at least a season together, I think.
Yeah.
Or they look comfortable. There's been no butting heads, no arguing throughout the games. I think the mutual respect they both have for each other, it's been a good fit, and that's what you could hope as an organization. When you pay two guys max money, your number one hope before you go to sleep at night is that both of those two guys can coexist.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you've got a bigger headache on your hands. If you're like DeJounte Murray and Trey Young right now, for an example, right?
Mm.
There's questions there, right? You've just
Yeah.
paid two guys. There's questions long term. Does it work? I don't think there's any hesitation for any Knick fan to say Brunson and Randle together work. You know, you could talk about what other pieces we want to add with them. What do they need to highlight some or help some of their weaknesses. But the good thing is they both work well together. You
Yeah.
know, they
Yeah.
both work well together. And I also think another pleasant thing is Brunson hasn't been as bad as advertised on D.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, we've seen worse defenders than we've had recently, and he's not strong defensively, obviously, but he's not the point where you can't play him late in the fourth quarter. Um, so that's a huge win for that situation.
Yeah.
So no need to take Brunson off the floor, towards the end of
Yeah.
games because he's getting taken advantage of. I think the fact that he's savvy, he can take a charge and he can still get a steal and he gives you great effort. EJ allows him to be on the floor. Um, so I think, yeah, integrating those two's worked really well. Defensively, obviously, that's been a key highlight. After that low point and spurring the 8-game winning streak, Mitchell Robinson, huge catalyst. One of my bold predictions was, could Mitchell Robinson be in the all-defensive conversation? And halfway into the season, he's absolutely in that conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you hit a lot of amazing points. I mean, the integration of Brunson has been amazing, amazing, amazing this season. I think the other key piece that's really been a really special thing is the the rebound, and pun intended, the rebound of Julius Randle. Like, I mean, the fact that the last few games at the Garden, we've heard MVP chants. That, last season we were talking about trading Julius, and one of the conversation pieces towards the end of the season was you might have to attach an asset to trade Julius. Now we're talking about building long term with Julius. That's a rebound. That's the epitome of a rebound. If his value has grown that much and it's been redeemed, that's amazing. To see slight offensive moves coming from Mitch, that to me is a win. And again, to have this point where, I forget who said it before, but to be at the point of being competent is really good, and to be competitive almost every game, that to me is, we're moving in the right direction. Um, and with regards to Jalen and his defense, what's up, Cormega? Um, the, we talked about this with Coach Nick. Part of it also too is it's the defensive scheme. Like, Jalen is the kind of player who's smart, number one, and he hustles. So with all of the rotations that we do on defense, I even though he's not going to be a premier defender, I do trust him to hustle and to make hustle plays and to make hustle defensive plays as well too. So, he's not going to be a lockdown defender, but he's always going to give his most and the most that he can possibly give in terms of defensive posture.
Yeah, and in terms of one of the things where we're haven't done as well is obviously we have an identity now. I think this team is more on the defensive side of things. Although our offense is still doing well, we can't really rely. I know we all agree there's shortcomings with the offense.
Hmm.
It's very much reliant on Brunson and Randle.
Hmm.
If one of those two need to sit, we find ourselves in a really tricky situation in terms of trying to beat good teams. But our best chance at winning, EJ and Chat, is to lock guys down, defend well. But having said that, like you said, highlighting earlier, and losing the Bucks game is decision making, from top to bottom, from coaches, brain fades from some of the younger players, Quentin Grimes, Obi Toppin, Fournier. I think every single person has made a brain fade. Would you
Hmm.
agree? At
Oh,
some point?
absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I think we saw one from Evan Fournier last night where he looked like, you ever play 2K and like one of the players is, you're just like wondering what the heck is that player doing? Like, it's just running around in a circle. Like, there was definitely a play where it's just like, instead of actually covering his man, he's like floating towards the towards the middle of the court, and it's like, what is happening here? You know, your player's right wide open, and then he like kind of realizes and runs back. But I also
Like when you're
think that
passing the control to your brother or sister, and between handing the control, the AI takes advantage.
exactly, and it's like your remote, your controller is not calibrated, so it just leans toward this one direction. But I do think that that's also the function of, we said this at the start of the season. This is an imbalanced roster. So when it's an imbalanced roster, there are going to be parts that are going to show how imbalanced it is. And so we knew that there were issues with having Cam, Evan, Grimes quickly. We knew that there were imperfections in that being part of your rotation. We knew that there were some imperfections in terms of Obi as your backup number 4. But at the same time, the progress we've seen also kind of overshadows some of the limitations that we see as well too.
Yeah, definitely. I think we are still a team that can be schemed against
Mm-hmm.
quite well, quite clearly in terms of our weaknesses, which we hope to address, and we'll talk about it later in the show. But the next question for you, EJ, in the chat is, what are things that you would keep the same? This is reflecting on the last 41 games. What are some of the things you would keep the same, and what is anything that you would change? What is there anything you would do differently over the last 41 games if you could have?
Things that I would probably want to keep the same is getting quickly those minutes. Because this is going to be the issue we're going to face once RJ comes back, and all the conversation last night was about how he's close, he's close, he's close. This is going to create an issue, like in terms of figuring out what the minutes are going to be and how do you distribute the minutes and give quickly upwards of 25 to 30 minutes. How are you going to figure that out? There are but so many minutes that you can allocate towards all of your players as it is right now. So that's something I would try to keep the same, is figuring out how to open up minutes for Emmanuel quickly. The thing I would change, definitely Hartenstein would be one of those things I would change almost immediately. He's a nice enough player. He seems like he's a pleasant guy, a pleasant teammate, an encouraging teammate. But in terms of him being your first big off the bench to replace Mitchell Robinson, there's just some issues there. And I guess one of the questions I would ask is that if we are committing to development this season with players like Grimes and development with players like Quickly, why not also throw Jericho Sims into that mix as well? How about you, CT?
Yeah, I like the things you mentioned. I agree completely with the Hartenstein thing. That's something I would change. And I'll start by saying with the Cam situation, I sort of knew what the situation is with Cam moving forward. I was surprised if he was going to stick long term. But having said that, I think we could have handled that situation so much better again. It's like the Kemba Walker situation all over.
Mm-hmm.
I still believe he should have been kept after that bad Dallas loss at MSG before the 8-game win streak. I think he sort of made out to be a scapegoat. Yes, Deuce McBride came in, and I wouldn't change anything in the world with that situation because Deuce McBride's been deserving of all his opportunities. But to just say, Cam's now situational, DNPing, and he's never getting in, I disagree with that. It should never be that way when you're coaching professional team. It should be based on needs. There was that tough stretch on the road where the Knicks collapsed. I think those 3 bad losses. We were banged up. Obi and RJ was out. And we were like 9-10-man rotate, 8-9-man rotation. And I think for Cam Reddish's trade stock, it would have been better to keep playing him, which, now a report came out today that the chat also hit on, is the Knicks are willing to accept 2 second-rounders now. Maybe had he been playing EJ 18 minutes and playing gritty D, getting steals, blocks, all of that, a team might have been looking at the situation saying, "Hey, we'll give up a protected first rounder."
Yeah,
But
definitely.
even if that wouldn't have changed Cam's value, the way I would have coached this team, I would have done it differently, and I would have just kept everyone on high alert, and I would have brought him in the second I needed an extra, defender. How
Yeah.
about you?
Yeah, no, I can totally see your point, and I think um, that goes to the Thibodeau issue. The Thibodeau issue is that there seems to be, from all accounts, sometimes a breakdown in communication, where it seems as if he just locks into this idea of what I said, I have to hold true to it, even if there are extenuating circumstances. So once they hit that skid, and he's like, all right, I'm going to lock down to this 8-man rotation, and then all of a sudden they have injuries. It's as if like, okay, hey guy, well, understand that there are extenuating circumstances and that you want to ideally remain with your 8-man rotation, but because of injuries, you have to extend opportunities to players like Cam. Particularly because, and I've talked a lot about this, Cam is one of those players that you could just envision being traded quickly, because the market seems so inflated right now. So if people are asking for a first round draft pick for Eric Gordon, had you continued playing Cam, could you have been one of the first people to make a trade, because it would have been a reasonable get to get a first round pick, but most likely a protected one, had you continued playing him, increasing his value. But I think that's just one of those things where, um, it's Thibodeau who's just kind of just quirky, in terms of his rotations. So that would definitely be one of the things I would change.
Yeah, definitely. There's been stuff on the fly that Tom Thibodeau's definitely shown a hesitation
Hmm.
based on his previous situations, and he's shown some growth, but ultimately a leopard doesn't change its spots. I think the Tom Thibodeau we're going to get moving forward is going to be very similar. I don't really see him changing a whole lot. It's kind of like that situation where if you want a kid to behave, you just got to take away certain toys, or
Yeah.
um, like in terms of Leon, if he wants, Tibbs to correct certain things, he's going to have to, reconstruct the roster based on the path he would like, and based on that, IQ's growth. Sims and all of that. I think a lot of those situations happened because he was forced.
Hmm.
His hand was forced. Would you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the thing. It's like he's a really, really good coach, but he's one of those coaches that you just see in sports where you just wonder, to what extent is he a coach of all situations? I will never ever forget, the interview we did with Chris Herring, with his book, and one of the things he talked about the brilliance of Pat Riley is his ability to coach multiple kinds of teams, whether it's wanting to be a rough and rugged blue collar team in LA. And he's like, well, he didn't have the players for that, so he just changed the mantra and the style of the team to be the Showtime Lakers. But then to really get the kind of team he wanted in New York and in Miami, that's the kind of coach you want. The kind of coach who looks at what he has in terms of talent and creates a style and a blueprint based upon the available players. Tibbs doesn't seem to be that kind of coach, and so we're getting what we get from him, and it has led to the improvement of several players, but it does leave some aspects that remain to be desired.
Yep, and that's a great segue. Now, looking ahead,
Mhm.
what are some things you would hope to see changed in these next 41 games?
Well, I mean, some of the things that I definitely want to see change is, can we really get to the point where the team is more consistent at home? Um,
Yes,
you know,
facts.
it's really impressive to have a winning record, especially for a team that is not the most talented
Mm.
team in the league, but to have a winning away record is really a positive step. It's really a great step. Um, uh, so my concern now is, can you do it at home. That's one of the things I would definitely want to see. Like there's no reason why the Knicks record is only marginally okay at home. It should be markedly improved. So that would be one of the big things I would definitely leave as a takeaway
Yes.
for the second half of the season.
Yes. Yep.
How about
And
you?
I agree. Yep. Echo your thoughts completely. And for me, the biggest thing moving ahead is just to have all your moves conducive to what's best for the future of this team.
Mm,
And I mean, young players just continue to play Sims over Hartenstein. He's more part of your future as well. Um, keep playing IQ and Obi if you plan
mm.
to keep Obi. Keep giving Grimes, which I think will happen. 36 minutes. Keep Deuce McBride. You know, um, maybe decrease Randle and Brunson's minutes,
Yeah,
30,
yeah,
36, 36, 38 max, and obviously we want the bench to be bolstered and improved, and I hope we do, and that'll allow those guys to have a bigger rest.
absolutely, absolutely. And there's an opportunity to really take advantage of the schedule, because when you look at the second half, if you take a look at the second half of the schedule, um, the Knicks are going to be home or near on the East Coast for a while. So there isn't this like massive like LA, or West Coast stretch for almost 2 months. So in terms of travel, in terms of really managing players and their time, their minutes, in terms of really, getting into the advanced metrics, this is an opportunity to really do some damage in terms of winning some games and taking advantage of other variables that other teams might have to contend with. For example, longer away stretches, longer travel schedules, travel conditions. For the most part, for the next 2 months, in all of January, all of February, the Knicks are going to be on the East Coast. So that is something you have to take advantage of.
Yep, definitely, absolutely. And I was thinking about it again, fam, after the tough loss yesterday. MSG, it's time to have that. It's time to have that serious conversation. Is it more a blessing or a curse? Hand on your heart. The New York Knicks
Mm.
playing at Madison Square Garden. We know what the crowd's like there. It's not always diehards. Is it more of a blessing or a curse that the Knicks play at MSG every single night?
That's a good question, bro. I mean, I'll answer it
Because
this.
I
Yeah,
mean,
go ahead.
just off last night alone, I watched a lot of Bucks actually because I put a few parlays on them. There was a game when they were on the road against Houston. Houston beat the Bucks in Houston this season. The Bucks were up like 10, and in the last few minutes, Drew Holiday threw the game away. Like I saw a player that didn't even look like a player of a max salary play. And then we rewind to last night, and I'm looking at a different Drew Holiday.
Yeah.
He's like he's got special powers or something. And I watched a player that was absolutely shook on the road in Houston, and I needed that game for my parlay. So there's a little bit in terms of saltiness on my behalf, but Drew Holiday threw that game away for the Bucks, and I'm like, last night he's hitting step backs.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what will the real Drew Holiday stand up?
I think I've been a Knicks fan for a very, very long time. And when you go back to the Garden of the 1990s, so like, obviously the last stretch of time where the Knicks were considered a really incredible team, the composition of Knicks fans who attended the Garden games is incredibly different than the composition of Knicks fans that attend the Garden games now. It's not something you can question. It's not disputable. It's just different. Um, Manhattan is incredibly different from what it was 30 years ago. Um, but it's had an effect on the home court advantage that the Knicks are supposed to have at Madison Square Garden. I take a look at this every single game, the lower bowl, what happens in the 100 section, halftime. If you take a look at that lower bowl at the start of the third quarter, there are so many empty seats because people are still getting food, they're coming back from the restroom. That's something that wasn't as present or prevalent in the 90s and the early 2000s. The intensity of the defense chant, the intensity of it during the 90s as opposed to now, I know it happens in the 300s, but it seems less of an intimidating factor. And I'll give you one more thing. One of the things that I learned about the Knicks in the 90s was that we were supposed to be some of the smartest fans in the league. And so if for example, Giannis is at the free throw line, one of the things you could expect Madison Square Garden to do in the 90s was they're going to amplify the volume to create a sense of anxiety and tension. That doesn't happen as much anymore in the lower bowl. Now, again, I have to get to the Garden this season to feel it in person, but the perception that you see in that 100 section, you don't see it that much. And even Clyde has made comments about that as well, too.
Yeah, facts. We cheer out the other team's play sometimes. I mean, we roll out the red carpet, basically. Yeah. And I compare that to an example. Let's say it was in some remote arena somewhere in New York, a dark, dingy arena where it's diehards only. You really feel like that environment against the New York Knicks is going to be way tougher for an opponent than MSG.
Yeah.
Right? But it is what it is. One thing that bugs me is what you just said. It's the free throw situation. Like you hear complete silence.
Yeah.
I mean, with like 1 minute. I'm not talking at the start of the game. I'm talking like with 1 minute to go in the game, in a tie game. The opponent's like Giannis is at the free throw line, and you don't hear anything.
Yeah.
I'm like, is that how it's at?
Well, that's why I definitely have to check out a couple of games this season just to see, like in person. Like it might be the way that they're miking the game, but I don't think it would be that because there's an incentive for the sound crew of MSG to mic it so that you hear the intensity, you feel the intensity of it, because that just gets you more and more into the atmosphere of the game if you're watching from home. But if you look at that lower bowl, like last night's game, you saw a lot of young Knicks fans. You saw a lot of, families there. And, maybe it's the cell phone thing. Maybe people are distracted while they're watching the game, so they're not as in tune with it. But it is frustrating because there used to be this aura about the Garden. And I'm not saying that it was perfect, because I do remember the double nickel game with Jordan and how MSG applauded the opponent. But at the same time, if you go back to any of those classic Knicks games, anything from the 93-94 season, it was loud. It was loud. It was boisterous. It was aggressive. And it doesn't seem to have that same temperament today as it did, crazily enough, 30 years ago.
Yeah. And one thing will be very interesting to see the playoffs, come play in playoff situation, which we'll talk about soon. And I think the Knicks will be there. That'll be a great situation because those fans pay a hell of a lot of money for tickets. So we're going to see more diehards. Yeah. And off that point, throughout the regular 82, a lot of season ticket holders sell. From what I hear, they sell their tickets, because they can't make all 82.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah.
So the secondary market is, you can see it, that there are a number of people you can tell are just there because they want to attend MSG. Because it's a destination. It's always been a destination, but at the same time, it does have an impact on the game, especially close games at the Garden. It does not make sense, and this is not the first time we've had this conversation, and it is concerning. And at the same time, like you talked about that dark, dungy basketball. It's called the Barclays, but sorry, shots had to be fired. But at the same time, I do think that it does have an effect on the environment of the game.
Yeah, facts. Yeah, we do need to vote our All-Stars in, Allah. Yeah, I agree. And in terms of playoffs, fam, and just off that note, if the Knicks are in the playoff series, 7-game series, what's our best hope is to win our home games. Take control of home court. Win your games, right? I don't care whoever we're playing in the NBA. If we lose the first two and we go back to MSG for games 3 and 4, you should feel good about your chances of winning games on your home floor. But right now, I don't feel that way. I mean, I feel like we have every bit as chance to win on the road as we do against versus MSG. How do you feel? Let's say we're playing a 7-game series, tomorrow starting against Toronto.
Yeah, I mean that's what's concerning is that you really should. I mean that's why we play the season is so that you have that home court advantage. So when we think back to the bubble season, we were all geeked up because we said we're going to beat Atlanta because we have home court advantage. And think about like how that went down to the last 2 weeks of the season, and we were angling for that advantage. And think about what it was like when we finally won that game and how 7th Avenue and 33rd and 34th Streets were flooded with Knicks fans. My concern, and I think CT, this is your concern as well too, is that will that same energy, that same passion be there to create that advantage for us and that disadvantage for the opposing team? I don't know. I don't know.
And I just
hope
put
it
in the
is.
chat, do we get home calls? We
Hmm.
don't. I don't. If I watch a game and I'm not a Knicks fan and I'm just a neutral, a casual, and I'm watching Knicks versus the Heat at MSG, I can't tell if the Knicks are getting a favorable call. I mean, never. I mean, you can hack Randle, you can hack Brunson,
No,
Mitch. The amount of times he pulls a rebound and gets his hand swiped,
no.
it happens so much. We have to earn. We're New York. I guess that's what makes me proud as a fan. We have to earn every single thing
Yeah,
up
yeah,
in this thing. The small market teams get favorable decisions. The New York Knicks have to earn everything, but respect can be earned, and the New York Knicks are exceeding or on track of my expectations. EJ, heading in, rocking out with the chat, ladies and gents. We're buzzing. Pop that like button, and we're looking back on the last 41, and we're looking ahead. 7th seed, 22 and 19. EJ, given the roller coaster situation, I'm guessing you would have signed up for this
Oh yeah, oh
start of
yeah,
the season, right?
oh yeah. I mean, this is better than having, you know, that 3 game stretch of blowouts in a row. I will settle for a team that's competitive, a team where you see players growing, a team where a team in a season where again Grimes is becoming a viable player. Quickly is becoming a viable player. Um, just to see 2 homegrown players, two develop, to see that, for all of the hate and consternation that existed during the off season where people were calling about CAA conspiracies, to see Jalen Brunson be a successful um, signing. This is not Jerome James. My second mediocre Nick of the day. This isn't Howard Isley. That's now 3. This isn't Shandon Anderson. That's now 4. Um, this it to me, I'm okay with this because we all came into the season knowing they weren't going to be on the level of the Celtics, of the Bucks, of the Nets, and even Cleveland. But this is what 500 teams do. But this is a 500 team with player development that's happening.
Yep, completely agree. Yep, we're on track. Definitely. I wouldn't say we're extremely exceeding my expectation because I predicted 45.
Yeah,
I predicted that the Knicks would be above 500. Based on a few points, and I'll be quick with it. I said continuity will be key. We're bringing back virtually the same roster, but just Jalen Brunson and Isaiah Hartenstein. And I said that would be a strength of the Knicks because Randle, the other guys, they've been around each other for a few years. Derrick Rose, quickly. A lot of other teams we're seeing that have had changes haven't adjusted too well. So we've only really made 2 key additions, which was Brunson and Hartenstein, and I think that played well for the Knicks.
yeah.
It helped us from the beginning, and I think the Brunson signing was underrated. I think we're seeing he's still underrated. He's Jalen Brunson is that guy that's going to be underrated for his whole
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
He's only 6 feet, 6'1". He doesn't really look like a all-star baller, and I get it, but he's absolutely that all-star. Let's go.
You know what I love about Jalen Brunson is that whenever MSG comes back from a timeout, he looks like he was just in a fight. Like he not only has that dog in him, but he radiates that idea. He radiates the idea of being that dog, and that's the kind of moxie, that's the kind of temperament you want on your team. And that what that does is that it kind of tempers when there are moments of fear or there are moments of where you're like concerned. It's like, no, we're still going to fight. We're still going to try to persevere no matter what. So that is one of the reasons why I do think that it was a really great signing, a really great signing. It was just overshadowed by all of the Donovan Mitchell
Yep.
rumors and
Facts.
innuendos.
Yep. And one of the reasons why it was so underrated is he was the second option on a Western Conference
Hmm.
finalist. I want to ring that home. I'll say it again.
Yeah.
He was the Robin, second option on a Western Conference finalist. Yes, he had Luka, but there was so much shade and so much shine given to DeJounte Murray's acquisition. Well, I love DeJounte Murray, the player, but what did he ever do with San Antonio, right? Was he a second option on a Western Conference finalist,
Mm.
right? We were getting so much shade. Like, why didn't the Knicks jump in on the DeJounte thing? Why didn't they give up two unprotecteds?
Yeah.
How could they get Brunson and not have gone for DeJounte? It's a CAA thing. It's because of his father up in here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, look at Atlanta. Which players made their team better,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen?
Well, listen,
Yeah.
everybody's going to conveniently forget that they said that, and like this was like an entire off season where that was the conversation. We spent we spent more time in the off season discussing DeJounte Murray and Donovan Mitchell than we spent time talking about Jalen Brunson.
Yep.
Like if you go
And there's
back and watch the podcast in June and in July and August, we spent more time talking about DeJounte Murray and Donovan Mitchell than we spent time talking about Jalen Brunson.
Yep. And I think that could have actually spurred him on
Yeah.
a bit. He could be like, man, why am I still doubted? I got helped Dallas to the WCF. I've been a 2-time NCAA champion, and also got some news for everyone. I had the privilege to talk to the one,
Hold on, hold on, hold
the
on, hold on, hold on.
only.
Hold on. Can I ask you?
Yeah.
What did you do today, CT? What did you do?
Yesterday, actually.
Yesterday.
It
What
was
did you do yesterday?
Yesterday, I was fortunate enough to be at a b-ball camp with the famous NBA legend. He's in the 75 greatest players of all time. Arguably the greatest international in NBA history.
We should make the
And
chat guess.
he's a one club player. He has a little bit of knowledge of Jalen Brunson,
Chat, any guesses?
and I had a good chat with him actually. So there's going to be some content drop with that situation. And ding, ding, ding.
There we go.
Yep, correct. The one, the only Dirk Nowitzki down under. Got to meet him as well. And what did he say to me? He said, unbelievable. He said what Jalen Brunson's doing, he's just so happy for him. But then he finished by saying, we miss him.
Wow.
We still miss him. That's exactly what Dirk said. So they miss him, right? There was a quote that I retweeted today from Mark Cuban saying they'll be able to replace Jalen Brunson's production. We all know that was optimism, when you lose a player in unrestricted free agency, it's not easy to replace. I'll
Yeah.
tell you that, right?
Yeah.
And Dirk said to me face to face, we miss him, we still miss him. So that just lets you know, the kind of player we got, and we get to build around. One question I want to ask you now, looking ahead, before we give out some grades.
Yep.
I asked the chat, and I asked on one show recently, I asked, with Brunson and Randle as two of your big three, Is that enough for you to say, hey, okay, keep those two, we find ourselves a number one, and we can contend?
I think CT, man, you always putting your boy on the spot. I think it depends on who the number one is. And I was really thinking about this before the show. The issue that we have in terms of our roster, whether we want to admit it or not, is we have a weird situation with RJ and with Julius. And I'm not shading them. I'm just saying, like, in terms of where today's NBA is, we have a weird fit issue with them. And here's what I mean. Is RJ a 2 or a 3? Is Randle a 3 or a 4? That creates complicated, like, and what I mean by that, and I think everyone knows what I mean, but just in case, um, RJ is too slow to guard twos, but not always big enough to guard some of like the top level threes. And similar with Julius, is he's too big to run after your prototypical threes, but not big enough to always handle like your number one fours, right? So I think the number one we chase, if you're saying that Brunson and Randall's are your aren't removables, like they're untouchable, then like you have to find that prototypical one that fits alongside Brunson and Randall. And I think that's going to be the thing, because now you're building with support first as opposed to number one first. And I think that's going to be the issue, this tricky thing. What are your thoughts?
Okay, yeah, agree, yeah. I could see a world, absolutely, where Brunson and Randle are the second and third option on a contending team. And a caveat to that question is you could do whatever you want with the supporting cast. And I think Grimes and RJ and the guys we have are absolutely a part of that question, and it depends on the type of player you bring in. For example, Joel Embiid, right?
Mm-hmm.
If Joel Embiid with Brunson, Randle, RJ, quickly, everyone else, that can be a contender, in my opinion. That can be a contender. So I say that to say this: we are closer than people think. We're closer than people act.
Yeah.
Everyone going into this season thought Toronto were getting closer to a chip, right? They've actually going the other way.
Yeah.
Everyone thought Atlanta were getting closer to a chip. They've gone the other way. Everyone
Yeah.
thought the Clippers are getting closer to a chip. Now we're starting to hear talk that they're ready to blow things
Blow it up. Yeah.
So whilst some people think a team's going one way, they're actually going the other way.
Yeah. I definitely think, bro, whatever that number one is, it has to be someone who is a definitive top 10, top 15 player. Like, it can't be on the margins, on the outskirts of top 10, top 15. And it has to be someone who is instant offense, because I think that's one of the issues that we have, is that there are moments where you just look and you're like, okay, where's the offense going to come from? In terms of like production starting unit at times. There's something about like looking at Giannis and like you just know that even if and chances are that his shot will be off in some way, shape, or form, but there's still this ability to drive and to get points when necessary that elevates the games of a Chris Middleton when healthy, or elevates the game of a Drew Holiday. So that's the concern, is like who would be that, and that's not my job to figure out who it is. That's the job of the front office. But that is going to be the issue, is that knowing Julius's game, knowing Jalen's game, the who would be is going to be really, really important. The who is going to be. It's going to be important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no disagreement. The guy got to be a top 10, top 15 guy, or certain unique skill sets. Like number one, I think they would need to come with outside shooting.
Absolutely.
The ability to open the floor up. If it was a Joel Embiid, well, yeah, he can stroke it. He can stretch it. Devin Booker can stretch it. One fascinating name I would ask you, and I don't bring this guy up because I think he's likely to be available, but
I know who you're talking about. ZL?
No, it might surprise you, but would Brandon Ingram with Brunson and Randle be enough to get us, let's say to the Eastern Conference Finals, NBA Finals? I know he's been out recently, but yeah, you got to think of Brandon Ingram when all things are clicking. With a Randle and a Brunson would be a handful.
I mean, Brandon Ingram is actually, you know what's funny? This is what I love about us, man. Brandon Ingram is a name that earlier this season we talked about earlier, much earlier in the season, and we had to keep on reemphasizing the chat. We kept on saying we're not saying him, but we're saying someone like him. The thing is, the question, and this is the question that Dirty Dancers is raising, is Brandon Ingram that top 15 player? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But I
He's
will say this: I've always been intrigued by Brandon Ingram, and maybe it's because he reminds me of KD. Um,
Yeah. What if I was to tell you all, with that in mind, Brandon Ingram is 25 years of
yeah,
age, and
I know,
you're banking on him being in his prime in 3 more years from now.
I know. I saw it.
He's sometimes you've got to have balls as a GM sometimes to say, hey, right in this moment, this guy's not going to get us there. But if I
Yeah.
bring him in, maybe in 3 years time, we're on fire. And I actually was thinking of this crazy scenario too with the Golden State Warriors, right? How did their
Mhm.
dynasty begin? People keep forgetting, and I'll make this quick again. They had Monte Ellis and they had Steph Curry. They were going nowhere, basically, but they
Mhm.
had a clear weakness that they needed to address. And the fan favorite, Monte Ellis, was traded for a tall, white Australian center by the name of Andrew Bogut, right?
Yeah.
The fan base went absolutely insane. How could we do this? How could we trade one of our favorite sons, one of our guys? What is the organization doing, giving Steph Curry the keys,
Yeah.
right? 2 years later, the rest is history. They win an NBA chip, right? Klay Thompson, Steph Curry becomes Steph. Draymond Green does Draymond things, and Andrew Bogut is a all defensive type of player. So they made a bold move, and they did the right thing for team needs. It worked out, you know. It worked
Yeah.
out with that situation. So yeah, nothing's promised.
And also, like, I'm reading the chat as we go. Like, guys, we're trying to suggest part of it is like you have to look at the context of the team. So, you know, the Pelicans will have part of this is like you have to remember not just the player's talent, but also the cap implications. So that's a part of this conversation. So please just don't look at, do I like this player? Do I not like this player? You also have to look at how is the other team going to fit that player financially. And the Pelicans are not one of these teams that historically is always willing to go astronomically over the cap to lock up all of its players, and that's going to be a real consideration. Similar to how, at the same time, we have to make financial considerations when it comes to OB and to IQ. So like these are like that's part of the conversation we're having. So, but one thing I will say about Ingram, CT, to your point, is if you ask me the questions, Ingram versus Zach LaVine, I'm going Ingram. I'm going Ingram.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Defensively, got great
yeah,
potential with his length, and it's
yes,
actually scary to think he's 25.
yes,
Right? That's still sinking in for me because he could be like in his prime. He could be the closest thing to KD
yeah,
in his prime.
and
Um,
in a different context too,
yeah,
because you have a ball dominant Zion, you have a CJ McCollum. That context would be different in New York for a Brandon Ingram.
and I'm not saying he's going to be available. I was just using that example as to what kind of player with Brunson and Randle could get you to being a contender. To try to highlight we are closer than people think.
Yeah,
With a nice core age. See, the stat and the mellow thing was tricky because they were 30 plus.
Mm-hmm.
in their height of their, contention window. They were 30 plus, and Julius Randle's 28, Brunson's 27, 26. So we got some situations to build with. EJ, you want to give out some grades?
Sure, that's what I do. So
Yeah.
that's what I do. So let's do it. All right.
Professor EJ, Nick's historian in the house.
All right, let's
I'll
do it.
start with probably the toughest one.
You
I'm
ready?
happy to go first as well.
Go
Or
ahead.
you could throw it at me. Who do you want to start with?
You want let's start with the starting five.
Okay. I was
So
going to start with the coach.
okay, yeah, let's start. Yeah, let's start with the coach.
And I want the chat, everyone on replay gang, everyone to participate. Give us your mid-season grade for Coach Tom Thibodeau.
Let's do it.
All right.
Ooh, Coach Thibodeau. Ooh,
Do you want me to go first?
yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah. I've seen some of the chat coming through. Yep,
Yeah.
that's reasonable. Yep, that's knowledgeable. I was going to go B minus.
Oh, you guys are nicer than I
Yep.
am.
Yep. Record wise, everything's going. He's achieving. You got to give that kind of uptick, but due to some of the decisions I've disagreed with and some of the things he hasn't, adjusted to, keeps him at a B minus.
You guys are nicer people than I am. Maybe I've been known to be a kind of strict grader. Um, so my grade for Tibbs was a C plus, uh, and part of it is that it's hard to grade the team based upon what it is, but some of the positives, I try to be as objective as possible, is the team is growing, the team is learning. Um, it's you can't commend uh, IQ for growing and developing, and take that away from Tibbs. You can't say that they're two separate things. They're related. You can't say that about Grimes. They're related. Mitch, it's related, right? At the same time, I saw someone say this. I think otherwise, the team has had some injuries this season, and at unfortunate times. Um, but at the same time, sometimes the rotational decisions leaves you scratching your head, like, dude, you have a guy right there. So it's a weird, it's hard to give him a grade in which you feel confident, but I would say probably a C plus.
That's very fair with that situation, and that was probably one of my more toughest kind of guys to grade, because
Yeah.
you could definitely highlight and acknowledge some of the positives and definitely some of the follies. The really really heartbreaking losses we've had. I
Yeah.
mean, I haven't seen this many heartbreaking losses, like to Dirty Dancer's point at the start of the show. This kind of emotion, the up and downness of that, but it's not been all Tom Thibodeau. So
Yeah.
yeah, he's definitely made some positive adjustments. Yep. So, what's the next starting player you want to give a grade to?
Let's start with, well, we did a difficult one. Let's do a very easy one. Let's start with our starting point guard, number 11, Jalen Brunson.
Yep.
I'll go this time since you started last time. I think this is the easiest one to give Jalen Brunson. Chat, what do you guys think? Jalen Brunson, it's an easy, very, very easy A. There's not much to say. A very easy A.
Yep. Absolutely easy A. I'll add an A plus. Yep.
Yeah.
A plus. Best Knicks free agent signing since I can remember, and might be in history
Might be.
right now. Yep.
Yeah.
And
Definitely the last 20 years.
yep.
Definitely the
And
last 20 years.
also, yep, room to grow still. I don't
Yeah.
think he's ceilinged out. Have you?
No, I definitely don't think so. And I think that you have to look at it with respect to who are his complements, who are his co-stars. If you change the co-stars, if you
Yep.
get one better co-star, he looks even better as a signing.
Yeah, definitely. Now I'll go next. Julius Randle.
All right.
Fam.
What do you think?
Julius Randle, considering 2 years ago, a year ago and where we're at as an organization, Julius Randle is every bit a part of why this team's had a success this season, and why I'm still optimistic of the future with this kind of Julius. Gone through the trenches, getting serenaded with that situation recently. Julius Randle's play, ability to buy in, the three balls going well, aside from last night. Julius Randle, to me, gets an A.
I love Dirty Dancer's comment.
Yep.
Dirty Dancer's comment was really easy. Um, I went back and forth. A pluses for Brunson, A pluses with Julius. I did consider it. But I will just say this, Julius Randle, and yes, I'm a hard grader, but he's an A. He's ninth in total points, fifth in total rebounds. And if you consider where he was last season, and all of the conversation which we had regarding his future with the organization, it's an A.
Yep.
It's an A.
Yep, like Allah says, yep, A for all stars.
Absolutely.
Yep, facts, yep. That's what's really got me considering adding a third guy. That's a number one option with these guys if we continue. But let's hope and the sample size continues. And all right, let's look at now RJ Barrett. EJ, you go
Oh.
first on this one.
Oh, I thought we were friends. RJ was a lot more difficult to rate. And when I looked at trying to figure out what grade I was going to give him, I would give RJ a B. And the reason why I gave him a B is because you have to almost divide his season so far into threes. The first third of the season, he started off slowly. The second part of the season, you could start to see him get into gears. And then he's been injured recently, and he was sick for a stretch of time. I did consider it incomplete, but I decided a B minus would be a fair one.
Yep, I'm actually agreeing with you 100%. B minus. Yep, B minus for RJ. It sort of evens out as well. Look forward to seeing the second part of the year for RJ, because that's where I predicted he would be clicking based off his slow starts.
Yeah.
As well. And also, not a lot of people have brought up this this point, EJ. I mentioned how well Randle and Brunson have integrated. We can't forget that RJ's been the second option since he got here, and Brunson coming in pushed him to less usage.
Yeah.
So it's just been 41 games that he's had to adjust to a brand new all-star point guard as well, adjust around that.
Yeah.
So I factor that in with RJ. And I'll tackle now Quentin Grimes.
Q dot.
Q dot had high hopes heading into the season. I predicted he would be the starting man on opening night, and he was a slow start due to the injuries as well. But I never once doubted Quentin Grimes' potential, and we're just seeing it evolve now. It's been one of the most satisfying stories of this season so far. He's got an all-rounded game. He's got more tricks in his bag he can show. But just for a sophomore kind of player, 30-something minutes per night now, he's living up to it. Quentin Grimes, I got to give him a B+.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm right there with you. And guys, I don't want you guys to think that CT and I, we planned this before the podcast and we're like, all right, we're going to give it the same exact grade. We did not do that. We did not do that. So Quentin Grimes, I said the same exact thing, a B+, particularly because he adds a dimension on the wing that seemed to really be missing around the basket. His ability to look for the open man when he's cutting, the ability to finish and make tough shots around the rim. For that alone, and his promise in terms of being a 3-and-D player, definitely a B+.
Yeah, you said it. Now, money-making Mitch, you're up.
Okay. So the man in the middle, number 23. For Mitch Robinson, I went also with a B+. Yet again, his rebounding this season has been commendable. His offensive rebounding numbers have been impressive, rather impressive. His desire to be an all defensive player has been rather clear. And he's shown at times a little bit of get up and go when it comes to the offensive end, which is inspiring. So I'd say something in the area of a B plus. B.
Mm. Now I could agree with you, or I could just switch it up slightly. Um,
Go with what your heart says.
yeah, I'm going to give Mitch an A minus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm going to give him a slight bump up, and I could go with the B plus. I think health's been good. There's been a lot of upticks.
Hmm.
Consistency's been good. He's gotten better at the fouling. Yeah, leading the league in so many different metrics. So yeah, he gets the A minus from
Dope.
me. Now, is it your turn for? Let's start with the six man.
Well, you know who that is. We were hoping that he would his would actually grow, and it seems like it has. And we're talking about none other than IQ. So IQ, CT, what do you think? A lot of initials tonight. IQ, CT, EJ. Let's go.
Yeah, IQ. High hopes again. High hopes. I just didn't think he'll be getting this much usage. So that's been more of a pleasant surprise, based on Tom's hesitation. And it seems like he's more comfortable starting now than he is
Yeah,
coming off the bench. Like
yeah.
that deserves a shout out, ladies and gentlemen. We're seeing another beastly IQ, different version of IQ as the starting man, and can't be a prisoner of the moment. So I'll keep it at a B plus.
As I go to my notes, I was stuck between a B and a B plus, and I did write in my notes, especially if you consider this stretch of games during RJ's absence. Honestly, like we don't want to be a prisoner of the moment, but it's impressive to become a starter. The mentality it takes to make that shift from being a six man to becoming a starter, especially when you're as young in your career as you are, is rather impressive. So I did consider his recent stretch of games and bump that up as well because of his recent stretch of time. And it just seems to really complement what's been
Yeah,
happening with Brunson. So I went B plus.
yeah, great points, fam. I think he's two-way potential
Yes.
now is definitely something that, it's so positive for the Knicks moving forward. And we'll go next to a couple of tougher ones, Obi and let's go Obi and Deuce at the same time.
Yeah. I have no problem jumping on OB.
Yeah,
The OB grade, I gave him an incomplete. It's really hard to figure out what to give Obi, particularly with the injury. We're at game 41. I think when I went back to the stat line, um, I think he's only played like 25 or 26 games. And because it's Tom Thibodeau, um, that sometimes means he's playing like 5, 6 minutes. It's hard to know how to evaluate that. So my OB grade was an incomplete. What about you, bro?
I'll be more forgiving and I'll give Obi a B minus.
Mm,
B minus because I really like the way Obi started the year for me.
hmm.
The shooting was there, the three ball, helping us in games with the scoring. He's always a live body, always cutting, just always still creating that energy. For that, I can't just evaluate recently. It's got to be the 41 games
Mm,
for me. And I think it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. He's been injured for a while that people are starting to forget the kind of impact Obi has,
yeah,
We I don't think we capitulate and lose a lot of these games if we had extra help with Obi.
yeah. And what about Deuce?
Yep. Now Deuce definitely gets a B, solid B for me. Solid B. A huge part of why we turned this season around. And also his consistency defensively, starting to hit some shots. We know his limitations, but I think for the role that Tom Thibodeau needs from Deuce McBride, he's fulfilling it. How
Yeah,
about
I
you?
think, yeah, I definitely agree with what you said, especially the end part where you talked about for what his role is versus what it was last season, where last season, like, I think he was like the paint. It was basically like he was never peeled off like the bench and spent so much time in the G League. I think for what he is now, especially having surpassed Derrick Rose on the bench, or off the bench rather, I gave him a solid B minus. Very impressive, and it's not to say he's not doing well. It's just to say, like, I am pleasantly surprised with the defensive energy that he brings on the court, and his hustle and his drive
Yeah.
and his ability to get over screens. So definitely a solid contributor. Very happy with them.
Yep. And now, finally, I think we'll give Hart a grade, and then me personally, EJ, chat, Derek Rose and Cam Reddish are incomplete.
Yeah,
I give them incomplete grades. They just haven't played enough to get to warrant a grade. But a man who has is I Hart. What
yeah.
are your thoughts?
I thought I was gonna I heart, but not that much recently. He is a C minus. Um, just especially, yeah. I know I'm being tough. I told you it was a tough grader. I think we all started off with the entire optimism in terms of what iHeart could be, um,
Yep.
and just hasn't really distinguished himself enough to be higher than a C for me.
Yeah, and you could give you a grade based off what your expectations were as well. And for me,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely a huge letdown for a lot of fans. Where we're questioning, not even, he was brought in as a backup, and
Hmm.
now we're at the point halfway, and we're questioning, is he even worthy of getting any backup minutes? I mean, that's a huge failure, a huge failed signing. Also, there is some elements of he's not getting used to his strengths.
Yeah.
So I always highlight that. But from what I'm seeing, what our eyes are telling us, I think Jericho Sims is deserving of taking his minutes. Um, so yeah, appreciate the chat. Appreciate you, EJ. We've given out grades. We've chopped up the last 41. Just before we wrap up, yeah, what is your thoughts now moving ahead, just for the next 41 and playoff bound, play in bound? Now's the time where we can solidify some predictions and then cash in some receipts.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the receipts we can definitely cash in, both of us can. We both predicted that this wasn't going to be a wash of the season. That is
Mm.
definitely a fact. You can go back to the podcast that we did right before the start of the season, right after a couple of preseason games. And we're both accurate at this point. We both said that there was going to be about a 500 team. You were a little bit more favorable in terms of your expectations. But my prediction was 42 and 40. My prediction at the time was also making the playoffs. Not necessarily sure if it's going to be play in versus playoffs, but the way things are looking, especially for teams like Toronto, especially for teams like Miami and a few others like Chicago, I definitely think there's a possibility for us fighting for that 6 seed. And an outside possibility, or rather remote possibility of fighting for the 5th seed, depending what happens to Philadelphia. As I
Mm.
mentioned in the preseason, I did say, Joel Embiid, will this be the season that he gets injured and that has some sort of effect on Philly's playoff chance? If you don't believe me, go back to that particular chat that we had. So
Yep, you
that was
said
my
it.
prediction. So I
Yep,
definitely think we'll be in the playoffs in some way, shape, or form, without question.
yep, yep. I like it. I love it. I agree. Like Dirty says, Durant being out creates a lot of cloud. Alas says 53 wins. Love that. um, the other thing I'll add, EJ, is people are forgetting about some teams are going to be sellers at the deadline. So there's going to be less competition to finish this
Yeah,
season. There's going to
yeah,
be teams trying to get L's
yeah,
for Victor Wembanyama. Teams not playing their best players. So I think the Knicks will get streaky for the win side towards the end. And I think, yeah, 6 seed is a distinct possibility. I think five's going to be a bit too tough.
yeah,
But in terms of upgrades, yeah, let's see. Let's see if we make any upgrades. And I think tomorrow night is a huge test for this
yeah,
club.
yeah. Seeing if
Yep.
Indiana's real. I think that's another thing. Like, I think that this second half, especially the next 10 games, you're going to see if certain
Mm.
teams like the Indianas, what they really are. Um, I think that's going to be a real important stretch of time. And again, I can't emphasize enough. I just went through the schedule like 3 times. That back half, there are a lot of East Coast and home games. So that's the opportunity for the Knicks to get fat when you have teams that decide, all right, we're not in this
Yep.
anymore. There's no need for us. We're going to stop being pretenders. We're going to sell off pieces. that's the opportunity to really get fat and to really fatten up that record and make it more comfortable. So we'll see. I think that it's really going to pick up. And in New York City, going back to the question from before, in New York City, you're going to see the importance of basketball really pick up in the next couple of weeks because after the Super Bowl, it's all basketball and to a lesser extent hockey in New York City.
Yeah, you hit, fam. And like Allah says, can't forget most mid-season trades take a minute for the chemistry, depending on who it is. Yeah, because let's not forget there's only 25 games after the All-Star break
Yeah.
as well. So that's going to be key. And I absolutely think the Knicks are going to be buyers, EJ, that
Yeah.
Tom Thibodeau strapped in, ready to rock, in the words of Walking Bucket, your favorite player's favorite player, Michael Beasley. I think the Knicks, Leon Rose, all of this thing, I think they really feel good about their chances of going in the playoffs and as far as possible. Tom Thibodeau's not getting any younger. We might have two potential All-Stars. I look for us to maybe, I won't actually be shocked if they do the Zach LaVine situation. I'll be
Yeah.
surprised, but not shocked,
Yeah.
because I think they might want to strike while the iron is hot. Um, I'm just starting to get that feeling each and every day now. The more we're in this thing, they see how close we are losing these games, and they think with an extra piece, fifth seed, like
Yeah.
it's possible. So we'll wrap this thing up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, everyone, please thank you for supporting Nick's Buzz so much. Please smash that like, subscribe button. Don't forget to follow your boy CT at Nick's Buzz. I can be found online on all platforms at EJ_Blanchard. Let's talk Knicks, all right? So thanks so much, Nick's Buzz. CT, back to you, my man.
Yep. No, you said it, fam. Yeah, our links are in the description on Twitter. We'll keep this conversation buzzing. Appreciate everyone rocking out for the mid-season. Yeah, it's funny to think how quick it's gone, and 41 games is such a small size when you really think about it. It's just been 41 games, and I think you'll really start to see this New York Knicks team click in the second part of the year as well. A lot of learning lessons to be had. Let's hope we've gotten all these bad losses out of the way, like last night, and we're learning, we're growing. These guys are passionate. Jalen Brunson's talking. He's breaking down film. How can I be better? I mean, just quickly, did you hear him after the press conference? He was he was trying to take blame
Yeah.
for the loss last night, even though it wasn't his fault. It was a career high.
But that's what I said about him before. He has that dog in him where he's like, no, I'm going to lead, and that's actually one of the things we talked about at the preseason conversation. Who will he be, that leader that can then allow for Julius to shine in other ways? So we're seeing it. It's good. We're making progress. Next 41
Yep.
up. Next
Yep.
Dirk
Let's get
up.
it. Yes. Let's get it. Let's talk soon. Everyone have a blessed night. Appreciate you. Let's go. Peace.